to Teachers Talk Radio. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Hello and good evening. Welcome to the Late Show on Tuesday with me, Hannah Wilson. Tonight we're going to be doing the fantasy dream team of education. We're going to be talking what we would like to see in the perfect kind of teaching world. What would we really like these politicians to put in place, let's face it. But I've got Lydia, she's here all ready to go. But before we get going, we've got our lovely sponsors. So we've got John Catt Educational. So this show is brought to you in partnership with them. They are publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles. And we also have a lovely discount code. So you can use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. We also have the lovely sponsor Teaching How-Tos. Have you heard of Teaching How-Tos? Imagine how your own instructional coach available 24/7. Now it's reality with the Teaching How-Tos platform. The highly personalised social platform empowers busy teachers to learn and apply evidence-based teaching techniques either independently, working collaboratively with their peers, or with our new AI assistant. The platform features over 160 visual guides to teaching techniques. Interested in finding out more? Then visit teachinghowtos.com and register for the next webinar. And me and Tom did a show with them last Tuesday. So if you want to know a bit more, then go have a look on Teacher Talk Radio and have a look at that show, and you can learn more about it. We've also got Easy For You, empowering education with Easy For You, where innovation meets accessibility. Their subscription-based offering not only equips schools with cutting-edge devices, but revolutionises the learning experience by eliminating financial barriers, streamlining support, and embracing technology. Easy For You isn't just providing tools, they are shaping a future where every student can thrive, unburdened by limitations. Easy For You, transforming education one device at a time. So find out more at www.easyforyou.school. And again, we had a show on them with them recently as well, so you can find out a little bit more about what they do. I think watch that one back as well. So these a lot of these were on Streamline, so you can see their platforms and what they offer. And our final sponsor for tonight is Apps for Good. So Apps for Good gives schools free introductory computing courses. The courses are for everyone, including those who aren't computing teachers. They're fully equipped with resources mapped to the UK computing curriculum, and students will develop essential and digital skills by working in teams to create a prototype Apps for Good. And you can visit www.appsforgood.org to find out more. Lydia, we need to get you on. I think we're having issues getting you on as a speaker, but I've added you, so hopefully we'll get you on in a moment. But yeah, so over the last couple of weeks, I've been stepping in for the lovely Brent and over on Education Tonight, and going through some of the manifestos with Adam over there, and we've got Paul stepping in and joining the keeping the seat warm this week. So we've certainly been going through all of that, and it's made me think about kind of what do we really want, because a lot of these manifestos feel like they've spoken to people in teaching and they kind of along the right lines. Some of the things are definitely like, yeah, that's kind of what we're after, but it doesn't necessarily feel like the nitty gritty, like the general what we want on the ground floor, like what everybody wants to kind of basically to happen. What do we want to see in the classroom filtering down? And actually me and Lydia were talking the other day that there is this vast kind of gap as well between schools, and depending on what academy you're with and what academy chain it is like really different depending on where you are. Like my old trust was a very, very big trust. It clearly had a lot of money in it, and our whole entire school got brand new whiteboards, and I was a bit like, as an art teacher, I was like, I don't want one of those. I'm quite happy with a normal board. But actually, kind of once it was up there, there's no difference between drawing with a board marker or drawing with a digital pen. They're both not quite the same thing as a pencil and paper, but it still did the trick. But for me, it was getting the visualizer and having a good visualizer and being able to draw that and having that present on us to a digital screen rather than a projector made the amount of detail that the kids could see in my drawing, as opposed to standing around me. They don't get the pencil detail, but visibly being able to see it under the projector and then on the digital screen meant they get much more quality in that respect. So it got me thinking. Now I've changed schools and we don't have that. I've got a projector that's not overly in focus some of the time, and it's really tricky because it's like, why didn't every school get the same funding and able to do that? But it's all about, I guess, how the trusts are spending that. And certainly me doing my master's in educational leadership and moving on to an MBA in educational leadership, I'm certainly thinking about the finances and how trusts are set up and how the money is spent. But it's just different, isn't it? Why is different schools so different? Why is it not kind of quite similar across different schools and different trusts? Why is there such a gap? And I guess that's what like one of our sponsors is for you. They're able to get devices to all of these kids, and they're able to have those, and it's under their kind of remit to try and reduce the kind of gap in terms of having that access to be able to have a laptop, and they're in charge of it. They come in, they charge it and what have you, and it's not that kind of school's responsibility. So it's certainly like there are things out there to be able to kind of be able to do it. But it's also one of those, like I'm going to the BEC conference, and I did go to the BEC conference when I was a trainee teacher, 13 odd years ago. But going again this year and seeing the how much everything has progressed in those over 10 years, and what a different kind of landscape teaching is now compared to what it used to be. It's that kind of, you go around there and you see what you could teach if you had all the money in the world, all the different things, is quite amazing to see. But it's also that kind of sifting through it all and working out what works and what doesn't is quite interesting in that respect as well, trying to work out what is the best one, what does work best, and seeing what works is tricky. But it's just made me really think like what the perfect school is and why aren't all the schools perfect. Because for me as well, when my son was born, he was very poorly. He was in hospital for a while. We were in NICU ward, and unfortunately, despite living only a couple of miles away from the hospital at the time, my hospital was full, and I got sent to another hospital that was over an hour's drive away, which, let me tell you, when you're in labour, was not fun. But when we got there and he was really poorly, he was put on these monitors. He had tubes in him and etc. etc. I won't go into too much detail. And we were there for a couple of weeks, and then one of the nurses we were having to travel to and from because there weren't anywhere for us to stay, and they were like, "Why are you at this hospital and not that hospital? You live right near that hospital." And I was like, "Well, we didn't realise there was an option." She's like, "I'll put you on the transfer list." And it took, because we weren't an emergency transfer, it took a couple of days, but then we were able to be transferred back to our old hospital. And when we arrived there, they looked at all the tubing and stuff and had to take all of the tubing out and reinsert tubes, insert lines and things, because none of it was compatible with this other hospital. And I was like, these are two hospitals within the same county that have completely different equipment. And for me, that was kind of like, and I feel like it's a bit like teaching, like we can have the same schools, like within the same county, but they have completely different equipment and completely different set of kind of what's available to them. And it's I think especially when you stay at a school for a long time, I'm a very loyal gal. I like to stay at a school for a while. It's opened my eyes about how different each school is. So what is kind of the perfect school, and what would be the perfect kind of thing to have? Lydia, I think we've got you in.
Way, we made it.
Oh, we've got Pat who's requested to speak, so we're gonna Nathan's gonna link him up as well. But thank you for joining me. We're going to have a good old debate. We are going to kind of look at the manifestos a little bit as well in terms of what's in there. But Pat, was there something that sparked your interest there that you wanted to join in on?
It's interesting because the Education Policy Institute published, I think it was just over a week ago, their analysis of all the manifestos. It was funded by the Nuffield Research, and it was fully independently done. And it was quite an interesting piece of research that they compared the manifestos and what was said about each from each party about education, and then they followed it up by looking at overall what the issues were, as well as per policy what the issues were. And one of the big things that actually came up was that there was lots of ideas on things to work, but there was a lack of idea on how things were going to become implemented. And similarly to what you were saying a minute ago, one of the big failing aspects of all of them was this lack of understanding where money's coming from. You know, we're seeing increasingly high numbers of students with SEND, but also a complete lack of funding for the increased costs of this. And that was one of the big errors of not being addressed in almost any of the policies.
Because that's my thing. It's like, how can a whole entire trust afford to do every single school in their trust and have new electric boards in, but other trusts can't, are having to cut? I know that they're saying it's around 40% of schools are going to be in a deficit this year because funding hasn't come that has been promised by the government. So there are all those issues. But for me, it's that, like, what are some trusts doing that aren't, or what would we all want if money wasn't an issue? And then it's kind of, I guess, like, schools are prioritising different things, and it's whether we are kind of all on the same page. I mean, if we're on tech, the obvious one, which we spoke about on Education Tonight on Thursday, was obviously the Tories going on about how they want to ban the use of mobile phones during the school day. What do you make of that one?
Well, I mean, I like the way that the policy put it. Is like largely unnecessary distractions and unlikely to have any real impact on improving outcomes. I mean, I think we all know, if you go to most schools, that that schools manage mobile phone use. It's not a new concept that phones are being managed in schools to differing extents. I mean, some schools will say you can't have your phones out at all for the day, and some schools have said, well, you can use them at small given times. But I think is, like, the data's there to show that having phones out and even having phones around students causes distraction. Even just knowing that they may get a ping in their phone or they're missing messages is a problem. But actually, you can't really get around that unless students don't have phones at all, which is just wholly unrealistic. But at the same time, there's more and more being put in society on schools to teach. And I wouldn't be surprised if at some point soon it's, okay, well, we already have it in PSHE about teaching about safe phone use. So, you know, being able to say to students, right, have you checked these settings? Do you know that you can get added to a random WhatsApp group if you haven't got your settings set up? And that could have some worrying implications. Do you know that your location is on in these places? But so I think it's kind of twofold. Yes, I think we need to manage phone use in schools, but I think that's self-explanatory. I think it's a bit of a weird statement to say that we're not managing it, when if I would argue that if you go into the majority of schools, it is being managed.
Yeah, I think that's my point, is that it's coming out with this big thing about mobile phones are going to be banned in schools, and it's like, I don't know many schools which they allow children to have phones out. Like, I know that they probably had them in their blazer pocket or what have you, and they might sneak a peek in the halls or at break or lunchtime, but generally at school, kids are not on their phones generally, or if they are, it's short amounts of the time of the day. And we had on Thursday night, we had Dr. Shanav Nishani, OBE, talking about his research into phones. And if you haven't listened to Thursday's show, do go back and listen to it, because hearing him speak about it, the screen demic, as he called it, was quite impressive. And I think it's that the majority of the phone use is actually when they get home after school. These kids aren't going outside, they aren't playing, they aren't interacting, and that is the issue. And he said generally it's when they get older, it's all the social media and the apps and things. So it's like, and I think on a previous show with Brent and Adam, they had, oh my gosh, the head of Michaela School, her name's popped out of my head.
Catherine, is it Catherine Burbelsing?
Yes, it is. And she was saying at her school they have them, but if parents are worried about the walk home or what have you, they've got brick phones, and they say they can have a brick phone. And actually, they're less likely to get mugged on the way home, and they can still contact home. And there was a BBC Yorkshire, I think, programme where they got kids to swap their mobile phone for brick phones. And one of the sweetest things one of the kids said was, I actually spent more time talking to my grandma and I enjoyed it because I was present. And then because I wasn't on my phone, I requested to go see her again and I really enjoyed it. And because I was enjoying the time with her, I asked to go spend more time with her. And for me, like, that melted my heart a little bit. It is kind of getting them present. But I just don't think it's necessarily in the school that it's happening. I think it's more once they get home. But like you said, I think it's important that school plays a role in terms of researching that and showing the kids the different parts of how phones can affect them and affect their mental health. But I don't know whether that should be a massive kind of chart-topping new ploy.
Well, I think that's if you look at the majority of the manifestos, that's where it goes really with things. I mean, the Liberal Democrats have the most number of commitments with regards to education, but they lack any actual plan on how to implement it. So I think a lot of the parties have tried to say what they're going to change with less ideas on actually how to do it. I mean, the Conservatives have stated more big ideas, or shall I say small ideas, but in a big way, that actually they're not the big problems. I mean, yes, phones are a problem. Nobody's saying that they're not a problem in society. But if you go to most schools, the things that's causing the biggest problems, I would argue, probably isn't the phones. It's probably more to do with funding, more to do with mental health, more to do with lack of support and knowledge and training and all those various different things, and a recruitment and retention crisis. Not, you know, I know I've heard of some schools putting phones into magnetized wallets for students not to be able to access throughout the day. But most teenagers are enterprising. A lot of them have bought a magnet so they can undo it themselves. You know, it's like the concept that you're going to be able to completely eradicate something is unrealistic in the majority of schools. But I think if we're thinking about manifestos and how to improve the ones that have been put forward, I think a lot of it is the lack of thought on actually how to do any of it. You know, there are hints and mentions about how to change, like, assessing schools and the Ofsted framework, and I know the Green Party have put forward the idea of potentially changing Ofsted's structure so it doesn't work in the same way, and that's sort of been addressed by a few different of the other parties. And I know that Labour have talked about thinking more about the whole child rather than just academically, which I think most people, if they were to look at each of the manifestos, they would see benefits for students. But the problem being that, yeah, we can all stand up on a pedestal and say all these things we're going to change, but the problem comes that pretty much none of them have said how they're going to change it. Or, you know, we're going to tackle inequality. How?
Yeah. I mean, Liberal Democrats did say that they were going to increase the tax on digital services such as social media firms, so to get some of their funding. But I don't know whether that will make them responsible or kind of deal with the problem there.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Imagine having your own instructional coach available 24/7. Now you can with the Teaching How-Tos platform. This highly personalised social platform empowers busy teachers to learn and apply evidence-based teaching techniques, either independently, working collaboratively with their peers, or with our new AI assistant. The platform features over 160 visual guides to teaching techniques, designed to help you quickly and easily implement high-impact practices that boost student engagement and improve learning outcomes. Join over 200 institutions worldwide that are elevating their teaching practices with the How-To app. No gurus, just practical support anytime you need it. Interested in finding out more? Visit teachinghowtos.com and register for our next webinar.
Empowering education with Easy for You, where innovation meets accessibility. Our subscription-based offering not only equips schools with cutting-edge devices, but revolutionizes the learning experience by eliminating financial barriers, streamlining support, and embracing technology. We're not just providing tools, we're shaping a future where every student can thrive. unburdened by limitations. Easy for you, transforming education, one device at a time. Find out more at www.easyforyou.school.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading. Hi teachers, we're Apps for Good, and we give schools like yours free introductory computing courses. Our courses are for everyone, including those who aren't computing teachers, and they're fully equipped with resources mapped to the UK computing curriculum. Independent learning is central to our courses. Your students will develop essential and digital skills by working in teams to create prototype apps for good. We'll even connect you with industry volunteers to give real-world feedback. Let's empower every young person you teach to shape their future with technology. Speak to us at www.appsforgood.org.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
Teachers and GPs are staggering under extra demands caused by poverty, according to a report in The Guardian. Desperate families, unable to afford food, clothing or heating, are increasingly turning to education and health services for help. New research has shown what, for many, has long been understood through anecdotal evidence, namely that teachers and GPs are acting as welfare advisors, housing officers and social workers alongside the day job. The study by the Joseph Rowntree Foundation also found that some teachers and GPs were providing toys and books as well as basic essentials such as food and clothing for children. Poverty campaigners have warned that the situation is now urgent. The study found that a third of schools and almost half of GP surgeries had set up a food bank. 44% of pupils were estimated to have come to school hungry, and health and education staff were dipping into their own pockets to help the others. Education staff said resources were being devoted to firefighting poverty and issues linked to it, but that meant less time and energy being spent on teaching. The report features a case study on a school in Manchester, and full details can be found on the Guardian website. The BBC News website has focused again on funding for special educational needs, with councils in England forecasting a massive shortfall in budgets. The BBC has found councils face a deficit of almost £1 billion, with signs that the gap between funding and spending is continuing to increase. Parent groups have focused on the difficulty in obtaining an education, health and care plan. They believe that without one, it's much harder to get specific support. Almost 600,000 children and young people now have an EHCP in England, and last year saw a 26% year-on-year increase. The growing demand is something councils are struggling to meet, and campaign groups expressed concern that some now have very little focus on children's needs because they're worried about the financial bottom line. The NAHT union has called for any new government to write off councils' accumulated deficits in SEND, but none of the mainstream parties address funding of SEND directly in their manifestos. The Conservatives have promised 15 more special schools. Labour promised to increase early interventions and mainstream support. The Lib Dems said they would establish a national body for SEND funding to be managed. And the Greens say they would push for £5 billion of investment for mainstream schools. Full details, along with a series of linked stories, can be found on the BBC website. Schools Week have focused on Labour's manifesto promise to scrap single-word Ofsted judgments and replace the current system with a report card telling parents clearly how schools are performing. There have been very few details, however, of what this could actually look like. The Schools Week report considers a wide range of options for the scorecard, having asked a range of stakeholders for their views on what information it could or should contain. Labour has promised to consult the sector on its plans. It's likely that changes would require a new inspection framework and some changes to current legislation, which would delay planned changes for around a year. Full details of the discussion can be found on the Schools Week website. In Louisiana, USA, every public school classroom has been ordered to display a poster of the Ten Commandments, according to a report on the BBC News website. It is the first measure of its kind in the US and applies to all classrooms in the state up to university level. Opponents to the move say the law breaks America's separation of church and state, protected by the First Amendment to the US Constitution. In 1980, the US Supreme Court struck down a Kentucky law, similar to the Louisiana law, which required the Ten Commandments to be displayed in elementary and high schools. Finally, the BBC also reports on calls by the National Secular Society for a school in Wales to be investigated after it allegedly promoted creationism. The NSS is calling for a ban on teaching creationism as it undermines teaching about evidence-based theories such as evolution. The teaching of creationism as a scientific theory is banned in England, but the promotion of it is not prohibited in Wales. A Welsh Government spokesperson said, "Community schools are not permitted to have a religious leaning, and we are in discussions with the relevant local authority." Full details of this story can be found in the education section of the BBC News website. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
Welcome to Teachers Talk Radio. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
What would you pick from any of these that you like to keep about kind of a framework, and what would you add in?
Well, I think it's a much bigger question than just like the Ofsted question, because I think if you look at some of the systems where they don't have overarching team of people who come in and look at your schools, that like a lot of systems don't have it. I mean, the Chinese system doesn't have it. A lot of the like I think it's the Finn system doesn't have it, but they work in a slightly different way in that there's a lot more collaboration between schools, and there's a lot more, and teachers are considered a lot more expertise. I think my issue with Ofsted at the moment is it's almost like a stick to beat teachers with, and also whilst telling them that they don't have the expertise to do their job. And in which case, if that is the case, what's being done to improve that knowledge gap? So I think, if we're going to change Ofsted, you kind of got to think about the whole system. So if we're taking away Ofsted as a theoretic accountability point, what's being put in place of that? Because fundamentally there are differences within schools, and we want to upkeep the highest standards for our young people. So I don't know what I would necessarily suggest in a place, to be honest, because I think we're kind of in such a weird space right now. It's hard to consider how to get out of it, because if we're going to have a body that goes from school to school and judges them, you would expect that body of people to be experts in what they're judging, and currently that's not really the case, in the sense that you have secondary specialists judging early years provisions who are missing knowledge on that. And we've seen issues with judgments being revoked and changing to grades. So I think and on the last point of that is the idea that actually these Ofsted grades, they don't just affect the school, they actually affect the local economy and the local people quite significantly. Like we've seen the data that when a school becomes outstanding, local house prices can jump up by tens of thousands, and businesses then therefore do better, but that can have a knock-on effect on other schools. So I think if we're looking at reforming Ofsted, we need to think about what is a sustainable approach that actually builds teachers and education as a profession in this country, rather than just uses it as a point to judge with a single word.
And I completely agree. I don't think the single word is fit for purpose. But like you said, it is that how do we make sure that schools are being accountable? But I think there's so much money going into these trusts and academy trusts and things that, and essentially a lot of the schools are monitored. Like the people, the big wigs at the top come into the school and they look around. If it's done properly, they're coming in quite regularly. They'll have time slots. Obviously, they go into certain schools that need more help more regularly, and the other schools they don't. So, do we need to make actually, instead of kind of having Ofsted, do we need to make the trusts more accountable and actually have something that's more of an Ofsted of the trusts, and then it's downgraded that the trusts are responsible for their schools, but then there's also like another body that but not so much as like they are monitoring them, but they should, but also more that it's like a network, that all the people at the top that are going into these other schools are all going to one kind of D of E event where they're all taught about different things that they need to be seeing in the schools. It's all coming from one voice and one place, because I feel like the thing with this Ofsted as well is that it's potluck what Ofsted inspector you get and how the experience is going to go. I've been very lucky in my career that when I have had some observations and when I have been called in for meetings, and I've had a lot of them, that they've been quite pleasant, and I've expected them because of everything else, like, oh my god, I'm going to get a grilling, but actually I've quite enjoyed them. But I also enjoyed and relish the opportunity to really talk about what I do. I'm very passionate. I'm like, this is my opportunity to explain everything and all the hard work that I've done and really shine. But I'll openly talk about the flaws and the things that we still need to improve, because there's never going to be that perfect spot where we're like, I've nailed everything, my educational plan is perfect, there's nothing to improve. We should always be developing and changing and growing, but I feel like there needs to be that consistent voice and that consistent group of people at the top that then feed into the academies, and then the academies are responsible for the schools, and it's all kind of trickling down, and therefore they can have more regular visits and more. They've got the hands on the thing, but if there's issues, they can pass it up and get more help from above. I don't know.
I think it's an interesting perspective. I think it's slightly flawed, though, in that there's a massive conflict of interest. Because if you're getting academy leaders and senior members of academies or academy trusts to run this, now they're judged as more successful if their schools are more successful. So you're kind of we wouldn't want there to be, but I mean there is a remit for those people to say, oh well, our schools are doing amazing, therefore we must be doing amazing. So keep paying us the big bucks, because we've seen that academy chiefs are on a lot more money than the teachers who are actually the change makers in the classroom. And so I think it's problematic for academy leaders to necessarily do the changing, because the other thing I think there's a problem is we've got teachers in schools doing the change making and head teachers, but we've now got executive head teachers, regional leads, area leads, subject leads, and you've got this whole infrastructure sitting on top of schools doing all these other things that there is obviously reason for, but it kind of almost takes away from the fact that it is a school and it is very local area dependent. The stuff that we teach at like my school will have differences to the stuff that's taught at your school, but for good reason. Like my school we do a lesson and series on safety that includes farm safety, because a lot of our students come into contact with farms regularly and train lines and these various different things, whereas a school on the coast might need a lot more time looking at sea safety and water safety, because that's where most of the students will be straight after school. And I think the problem with Ofsted and the problem with these various different situations is that there are such huge differences between schools, and it's such a snap judgment that's made. I actually think we need a regular viewpoint of schools rather than this like hugely spaced. I mean, my own secondary school that I went to didn't get judged for over 15 years. Like, how I could have told somebody that the school was different from when I started it to when I left it in the 5 years, from year 7 to year 11. It doesn't take a genius to tell somebody that in 15 years it's probably changed a fair chunk. And also, we like with Ofsted, people do all this training on how to do the best for Ofsted, rather than actually just being the best school that they can be. I think a lot of senior leaders will maybe say that they oh no, we're trying to be the best we can be. But there's always, I mean, how many times have we all heard in training, you know, Ofsted particularly want to see this, or, you know, we need to make sure we've got all this in line for Ofsted. Or what? But that's not actually benefiting our students.
And that's the thing, that our stakeholders are the students, to use the big words. Like, it's the parents and the students, they're our stakeholders. And that's what I think. I think if it wasn't that we didn't show like a good, outstanding, required improvement, but instead you wrote like a thing about what your school does best. Like, my school is really good at encouraging students to speak out loud and be polite and be good role models, to have kindness, to be part of the community, and like emphasize those bits. Like, we've got a great SRB, so we're really good for SEND kids. Like almost like work out what your USP is, because all the schools are slightly different. Like, what is it that the nitty gritty that we benefit our students over the school down the road? And that should be kind of what's written on the report, the little things that you see, the feel that you get around a school, as opposed to it being it's this and this, and it's just judged on those. That it should be like what this school kind of encompasses and embodies, and the kind of students that you go out. I do think like it has to be some measure, isn't it? Like, whether we I'm gonna move on slightly, like Progress 8, whether we do that. I do think there needs to be less emphasis on English and maths. I feel like having a friend that's currently moved to a head of English job, and the pressure they have on them to get those results, and quite often at the detriment to other subjects. Like, depending on what school you're at, you might have booster sessions, and those to try and boost the kids getting English and maths, but then the other subjects don't see those kids, and then it affects their results in the other subjects, but then you're pulled up for why your results are bad, but you haven't seen those kids. So it's like, and I know one of the Labour policies is to add in one of the arts into the buckets, and and to count as one of our core subjects. And that is my favourite thing that I've seen in all of the policies, because I think there's there's such a positive thing to do a creative subject, and the positivity in your mental health is seen to do.
It's interesting because the policies and the differing manifestos, many of them from different parties mention increasing vocational opportunities for our young people, which I think is a really positive step. Again, less on how it's going to happen, but I think it's really important that whichever party is successful, that they actually think about how this is going to long-term sustained work, because I do feel for employers at the moment a little bit with the changing names of qualifications. I mean, we've had NVQs, then we had BTECs, and we've had everything. Then that moved to something else, and then we're at T levels, but some T levels got cancelled back to BTECs because the T levels didn't work, and these various different things. I mean, I think whatever we do for our young people, it needs to make sure it's reliable. I mean, I think it was the one of the biggest degree apprenticeship or just general apprenticeship providers in this country. I think it was a degree apprenticeship, laid off a huge number of their degree apprentices and left those young people not in a position to continue their training. And I think, you know, if we're looking at changing the buckets and taking an emphasis off English and maths, we need to think about how it's going to sustain and how it's going to stay relevant, because, you know, English and maths have got a huge problem at the moment, because, you know, maths, we don't have enough maths teachers. You know, the Conservatives have mentioned in this current period of time they've been in that they want to do maths to 18, but we don't have enough maths teachers to maths to 16. So I'm not really sure how maths to 18 is going to work when we don't have supply to meet demand currently. So if we're going to make these changes and try and strengthen these things, we need to be realistic for our schools on actually how it's going to happen, because putting a half effort into something is not going to make it work. But I think, you know, a lot of our education system hasn't changed significantly other than adding content in a long time. I think, you know, we've been pretty stagnant about the fact the subjects that we offer in school, and stagnant about how they're assessed in terms of an assessment point at 16 and an assessment point at 18. And I think I would be really intrigued to see if any of these parties potentially in the future could offer something that's almost a very radical difference to support the 21st century that we live in, because these discrete subjects are not necessarily fit for purpose for supporting our students in the longer term?
I'm going to see if I can remember all my points because that was riveting. The first one is like the only person that's not backed the arts is Nigel Farage, and he's got the art teachers up in antes. Because actually, the creative industry in the UK is one of the biggest growing sectors, and actually brings in quite a lot of money into the UK. So it is important that we are investing in that as much as we are the other areas, because actually it's one of the places where the kids can get a job, and the theory behind it and the research shows that actually it's a job that they tend to enjoy, and there is such a thing as working for joy and love rather than money, because that's what we all do as teachers. The other one was like you talked about kind of apprenticeships
Hang
and
on a
stuff
minute,
like
other
that.
people are getting rich off this.
Oh, only at the top. But you talked about kind of like, I completely agree in terms of it needs to be relabeled and reassessed so it's much clearer, and just kind of one or two like modes of transport in terms of where people are going in terms of their education and what all the levels are called and what the difference means. And also that needs to be communicated back to teachers, because I even get kids in year 9 asking me about what kind of things they need to do to get into this job and what pathways, but the T levels and stuff wasn't really informed back down to the teachers. We kind of were forgotten and not really explained it, so it's really hard to sell it and explain kids what to go into if we're at schools that don't have those, and we're trying to advise kids onto which one to go onto.
Also, some of them have been withdrawn. I mean, there's been some colleges that went to set up some, and they started having applicants, but within the application cycle they had to cancel the course because it just wasn't feasible to actually get the employers and the locations and all those different things. So like you're right, it's not been filtered necessarily well down, but I think part of that is because there's so much uncertainty about it and so many things running at the same time, so you now have overlapping courses left, right and centre, and a confusion as to, like, I genuinely feel sorry for some employers who are going to be looking at like CVs and resumes trying to work out what on earth the qualification is.
I completely agree. And I the other thing that you said about was work experience and things like that. Now, I think the Labour said about guaranteeing 2 weeks worth of work experience for every young person. I'm kind of like, I feel like that maybe all secondary school children should do work experience, and it should be like the first week of the holidays, so that they do it, and therefore teachers can then have a week of kind of basically in school days where we can actually plan, reset our classroom, then actually go and have a nice summer break where we don't actually have to think about all the things we need to do in September, and we come back fresh, but we actually have a week to kind of catch up, reset, / we're there if for safeguarding or any issues for those kids. We send them all out. That's what I say.
Yeah, but again, great idea. In practice, not sure how it works, because the reality is like, knowing for a little bit of the work experience stuff that we have to put together for our students, there's an awful lot of forms that have to be filled out. There's health and safety, there's safeguarding. I mean, our school does a huge effort, and we get an awful lot of most of our year 10s out for work experience. But then as staff, we do spend a lot of time then when they're on work experience going and checking they're okay and building the relationships with the local employers. But I'm also aware that that's not necessarily going to work. And I think there's like companies such as Unifrog, amongst others, have put a lot of effort into these virtual work experience days, which I think are also really important, because, you know, work experience, depending on where you live, can look very different. If you live in a big metropolitan area, there's going to be a lot more choices for work experience than potentially if you're in a more rural location where, you know, realistically you may struggle to go and get a games design like work experience, or you may struggle to get some of these things. So I think being able to direct students to these resources and say, okay, well, I get that you're really interested in this one thing, so what can we do to support that idea and you know, use this tech that we have to an advantage?
But that's the thing. I think if it came from government, and therefore the government are supporting different businesses and able to link them to have students in, and also it was like this national week across the country, then everybody else is going to be slightly more supportive that everything in life is going to slow down slightly whilst the 15-year-olds work out how to do something. But like, it is, if it was a whole national thing, I mean, what was the thing, the national service or kind of volunteering once a weekend, one weekend a month for a year? I mean, I think it would be kind of essentially like about that, but just compressed into one tiny little week, but also give the teachers the respite to actually catch up. Because I do feel like in the dream school, we'd have more insets. I feel like we don't get enough time to plan. Or I know Tom's done shows on like 4-day weeks, or having one day off a fortnight, or we had the happy head talking about his school with having early finish time on a Friday.
Yeah, I mean, the data shows that that schools where staff are spending more time being experts, in that they have more time to do research, collaborate with other teachers and with specialists, actually typically do better within different, like, if we look at the national PISA testing. I mean, for example, in China, they spend a lot of time doing lesson studies and going and seeing different teachers and seeing how the expertise is being demonstrated that way. If you look at the Scandinavian countries, they typically spend more time as a teaching body formulating how they as a group are going to work for the year, and how as a group they're going to lead change, and then regularly making up for that. And I think we have an interesting system in the UK where we start off the academic year with 2 days that are the most intense, overwhelming days going, where you're given an awful lot of information, as well as all these changes that need to be implemented, as well as CPD on how to be a better teacher. And then at some point you're supposed to have planned the first week of lessons before you then start teaching immediately after not doing it for a little bit. And then throughout the year we have twilights where you sit in a room after you've taught for 5 periods, listening to some CPD, and then straight away the next day having to try and implement it forevermore. So I think, we do have a bizarre system in this country of continuing professional development, and we see a lot of other countries doing things like more conferences for teachers, not just educational researchers. And I think we could learn from that. I think we need a bit more collaboration in our education system than we currently have.
And I completely agree. I think it should either be a half-day inset and a half-day implementation, or a day of inset and a day, 2 days inset and a day to work out how to get it to work within your department. So you've got a day to actually plan and act on it, because I feel like there isn't that uptake time to be able to kind of do things properly. And same as I think every teacher should be allowed kind of 3 days off a year to be able to go to a conference, to be able to go visit another school. My school does. It is like, has anybody not been to another school yet? You need to get that done by the end of the year, I think that's so important. But it's also a great opportunity to remind you, if you have your career development needs, we have you covered. So we've got our lovely sponsors over at John Catt, who have their amazing professional development books, and you've got our amazing code of JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. We've also got Teaching How-Tos, which have their platform for instructional coaching available 24/7, and it's really great. Like, you can be like, right, I'm going to focus on questioning, and it has all the different options, and then you can type in the AI assistant and it will give you like, right, I want to do a lesson on this and I'm going to do questioning, and it will give you how to do it, and you can change it per year or how class or anything. It's really interesting, but you can check them out at teachinghowtos.com. We've got Easy For You at www.easyforyou.school, who are innovations in meeting accessibility, so equipping your schools with cutting edge devices. And we've got Apps for Good with free introductory computing courses. And I think this is really important, because I think there's a big gap in terms of the level of computing skills that teachers have, and actually we should be spending time on upskilling teachers and making sure everyone's to the same level, so we're all able to kind of deliver the same message to the students. But www.appsforgood.org to check out their free courses, or they obviously have their student courses and app development skills over there as well. What would you change in terms of what would you want to upskill teachers in more?
Well, I think tech's interesting. I think all careers is a big one, because if it depends what we are considering what the point of school is, which is a weird place to start that. But I think if we're going to upskill teachers, we need to really consider the purpose of school, and then almost work our way back from there. It's like, so from my perspective, as someone who's passionate about PSHE, passionate about science, and where those two worlds meet, I think it is really important to be able to talk to students about different careers and different pathways and different things that students can go off and do, because I think that helps with that hinterland knowledge that we bring into the classroom that really brings a subject to life. And I think upskilling teachers on careers can be a game changer. Being able to say, look, these are different pathways. You're interested in this. Why don't you go and do that? I've been talking to some of my tutor group who have been growing basil and chives on my windowsill for the last few weeks about different careers. Well, they had not a clue what a botanist was, and we had a conversation about botany and why is that important. And actually, we live in an area with lots of farmland, so botany can be incredibly important there. And all these different concepts. And I think if we upskill teachers on careers, it's important, because also a lot of teaching staff have been in teaching for a fair chunk of time and therefore have only really experienced the careers that they see around them. It's the same as if you teach at a school that's right near a hospital, a lot of the students will talk about wanting to go and work in caring and hospital jobs because that's what they see. Or if you work in an area that's near lots of cafes and that kind of hospitality, that's more of a tourist area, that's what students see. They might not necessarily see all the roles behind it because they've not been exposed to it. So I actually think upskilling teachers in careers, and also maybe tech, but in careers, can actually be a game changer for inspiring our young people into careers that they might not have seen before. I mean, our careers market is moving so fast, that actually staying on top of the careers that are available currently is important, because the careers that were there 20 years ago are completely different to the ones 10 years ago, completely different to the ones now. Social media manager 10 years ago didn't really exist, whereas now pretty much every big corporation of more than 200 employees has social media managers.
On that, then, well, I've got two things. So firstly, I think we need to sell people on different careers, like you said. For example, I had my lovely niece and nephew on when we were doing Teaching in the Family Part 2, and we were trying to persuade them to be teachers. Both of them kind of coach and do that kind of thing, but they were like, no, I don't want to be a teacher. And I was like that when I was younger. So I don't know what it is about the teaching profession that people are like, oh no, but do we need to remarket the teaching profession? But then secondly, if everything is changed in the outside world, do we need to actually, I know both the Conservatives and the Labour have said about knowledge-rich curriculum, but do we need to flip the curriculum and modernise it so it's actually more relevant to the students now?
I think we need to make it more relevant. I think the thing that's the problem is when people talk about knowledge-rich curriculum, no one's arguing that we don't need a knowledge-rich curriculum, but what we are arguing is about which knowledge is considered making something knowledge-rich. Because currently we have these, you only have to look at the science GCSE course. It's an absolutely mammoth piece of teaching to get through that although is important if you're going on to do certain subjects, is slightly irrelevant for the majority of students. Now, I think what it actually does is put students off of independent learning about it. I often end up talking to students about why it's relevant and why they should care and where it might come up later in life. But I think I kind of agree and disagree with you in the sense that knowledge-rich, yes, because statistically knowledge-rich is the best. But which knowledge, I think, is the argument that's to be had. And I think we need to consider which knowledge we are imparting on our students and how that is helping them going forward. But then that links back to what is the point of school? Is the point of school imparting what we consider the basic knowledge to be a functioning member of our society? Or is the point of it to prepare our young people for the world of work? Or where is the point? What do we consider the point of school in order to actually to do all of those things?
It's exactly that, because I feel like actually would we be better off slimming the curriculum down? Are we trying to include too much? Because actually we've moved on and now we've got like the last 10 years the world has developed so much, but we're still trying to hang on to those past bits. Do we need to narrow down what we deem as important, but then who deems what is as important? But then do we need to make it more relevant, more slimmed down, and therefore give room for more disciplinary knowledge where we're having that flip learning, having those conversations in a safe way of how to kind of have freedom of voice of what's right, what's wrong, and have discussions around things. So we're creating more well-rounded children that can go and articulate themselves and know how to have a discussion in a correct way. And in the same respect, do we actually need to flip the education in terms of, do we need to include like a whole more of a PSHE kind of weekly thing, a mental health kind of lesson? So once a week, all the kids are kind of taught about how to look after themselves, how to check in, how to deal with strategies. I know I do it with my tutor group and tutor time, but I just feel like 20 minutes isn't long enough to kind of dig deep, and there's so much to cover in terms of what they need to know about all the different areas like gambling, credit cards, debt, like mortgages, and that's even before they go on to their mental health, anxiety, how to deal with those.
Well, I mean, you only have to look at the proposed revisions to the RSE update that's been going through recently to see that the PSHE content that's currently in review for another week is that actually that even 1 hour a week isn't going to cut it, because the amount of content that's considered like mandatory and statutory within PSHE or potentially considered to be as we were in the review process is massive, and it's all relevant. And I have a lot of students come to me as the lead of PSHE and ask about, where can I find more information about this? So we obviously direct them to lots of resources. I'm more than happy to sit and have those conversations with pupils, but it's about the fact that PSHE, I might be biased, but I think it prepares you for keeping yourself safe, for keeping yourself healthy, for helping you manage your world of work and your career and your home life, have some healthy relationships and manage your money. And that's the kind of the big aim of PSHE. And I actually think there needs a lot more time towards PSHE, and I think that almost needs to form the basis of everything else. We've got careers that we are desperately calling out for people to go into, but logically it makes no sense to get there at the moment. We need people who can fix electric cars, but at the moment, to get onto a course like that, you have to do all of your courses to 16, and then you start at basics level on an engineering or vehicular development course, and that's a couple of years, and then you've got to go somewhere else for another course or try and find an apprenticeship that may or may not fall through, and I just think we need to streamline the process significantly to make it work.
I completely agree. I think almost more importantly, there should be a PSHE lifestyle type exam. That should be the exam that the kids have to pass, before, that they're not, rather than maths and English. Granted, maths and English are really important, but that should be the one, should be up there with them, that they know all these different things. I wish I understand mortgages and interest rates and stuff a lot younger. I wish I understand about credit cards and stuff, rather than going to university and being given one and then understanding what on earth that meant when I spent on there. I just think, like you said, it's going down to the nitty gritty of what is the purpose of school? Is it to prepare them for when they leave school? Because at the moment it seems to be that, doesn't it? It seems to be that all the issues in society, there's a lot of it, that pressure being put on schools in terms of, we need to sort the kids out and thus sort society out. And there's a lot of falling on our shoulders, but do we just need to make it that they all do the same thing across the country and kind of have it as a standalone exam in that respect?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. I think we need an overhaul of the perception of education in order to make that happen. I think parents generally, the engagement with parents seems to be rapidly dropping, and significantly since COVID as well. And I think because of all of that, I think almost like a complete refresh needs to happen over what school is, what are the expectations, because you only have to see something happens in society and it's like, oh, the school can fix that. We've got an increase of this. Oh, we'll make the school, we've got more kids who don't know how to brush their teeth, so let's make a school do that. We've got another problem with this, let's make school do that. But if that's the point of school, to educate, there needs to be a bit clearer lines on what we expect parents and guardians to do vis-a-vis what the school's job is, because I think at the moment we're weirdly getting into this point where it's like, is it childcare? I think some people in society seem to think that school is just childcare.
Okay, so here's my solution, my dream team solution. If we, going back COVID times, now COVID for me as an art teacher, when we had to mark and submit the marks for our thing, that was normal for us art teachers. We would normally mark all our kids' work, we submit the marks, and then the moderator comes, they select 15 kids at random, they mark those, and if our marks are within 5 marks of their marks, the marks stick. So now I think that we should be able to do tests and exams to a certain point, but we mark them in schools, and then a moderator comes and then checks that we're doing that right. So there's less exams because a lot of kids can't deal with the pressure of exams. And let's face it, if an exam on that one day, if you felt sick or you've had a bad day or had a bad sleep, it's not a good representation of you. And that teachers can essentially put forward a collection of coursework and exams that the kids have done over the 2-year course, and they say what the grade they're working at. So that, I feel, would make the children and the parents respect the teachers a bit more, because essentially it gives the teacher back a little bit of control. Not that they need to use that irresponsibly, but it just might mean that they might respect them a little bit more, that actually they need to listen to what this teacher is saying and how to improve your work and how to respond to that and how to support your child. But then also it just means that it's, rather than this test that's based on how you were feeling on that one day in that one room, I guess, like, for me, I'm a little bit like, I'm resentful because I did random A levels. I did history of art and chemistry, and both of those exams were on the same day at the same time for all of my A level exams. And because I'm
I had a
dyslexic,
similar
I got
thing.
extra time, and they were like, I think I ended up having 3-hour exams. So I had 6 hours of exams on one day where I'd sit with the teachers and have lunch in between before doing the other half. There was no way I could revise for both sets of exams for the same day and
I
do
had
well.
biology, I did biology, geography and law, and for some reason that was never an anticipated mix. So there was one day where I was in exams from 9 until 6 in the evening, and
Yeah.
I had a similar thing. I had to be escorted and kept in a room, and I just remember the look on the faces of the law teachers after, I had at A level, you have to write incredibly fast for your law A level. You're averaging about an A4 page roughly every 10 minutes. And I remember the look on the law teachers' faces when there was 4 of us left, and I was at a big college, so the exam hall had hundreds of people, and it ended up with 4 of us left in there, finishing this off, and the law teachers taking pity on us. But to this day, I know that my results were impacted by the fact that I'd had a full day of exams, whereas somebody who was only sitting that exam that day would have had a completely different experience. And I just think, and on top of that, my brother's got really bad hay fever, and it comes to the summer exams,
Yeah.
and he's got a puffy face because the pollen's broken out, and he's sniffling everywhere. He's got a slight headache from the amount of he's been sniffing, and now he's got to sit down and do an English exam. I think we need a bit more. I don't know. I think we need to think about why are we going with this, because we don't actually really at any point super encourage investigating their own interests. Like, I remember at A level I did the extended project qualification, and I absolutely loved it. I remember being sat in a room with people from across the college. We were all doing completely different topics. We were encouraged to reach out to people in society and find information. And by the end of it, we all had these quite cool projects. I mean, I ended up speaking to one of the leading specialists in the world on thalidomide research, because that was part of what my project was on. In what other world would a 16-year-old be in that position? But because we were all looking at stuff that we were really were interested in and wanted to find out about, we could do that. There was somebody who sat next to me who, when I did my project, who did theirs on like the golden ratio within maths and all the formulas behind it, and actually how that affected media and plastic surgeons. And I think, I know it's a bit of a bizarre example, but I remember thinking like this was one of the first times in my educational career where I got to pick a topic and really go put all my effort into finding out about it. And I think we need more of that for our young people.
I completely agree. I think like that kind of style at GCSE, where they have one extended project where they get to pick and research their own thing. But again, it's one of those, isn't it? It depends whether your school's got enough computer rooms that you can then timetable that in. Like, I get that the logistics of education is really difficult. And to be honest, I was a little bit disappointed after COVID when we did do it that way, that I was like, oh, this is going to be it. Exams are going to change forever. And it didn't. And same with Ruth Perry. I thought, this is it. Ofsted, the way we do Ofsted is going to change forever. And it's not. And it's a shame that it does almost feel like education is at this bit of a stalemate, because technology has massively improved. We also have all this research. We've got so many more people researching about how children learn and what that, and we know more. So therefore we are developing as teachers. We know so much more that we are trying to fit into the lessons than what it was like when I went to school. But I still learn. I still did all right. But the level that these kids are learning at now compared to what they did 10, 20 years ago is insane. And I feel like we're quite critical of these kids. They're like, oh, they're the worst behaved kids. They're the rudest kids. They're the what was the word that I used? They don't really have any resilience. But actually, these kids are kind of being put through far more than what kids were previously, and it's we're teaching them stuff that potentially isn't like as necessary for them, so therefore they're rebelling against it a little bit because it's they don't quite comprehend why, because the world is changing so quickly. I mean, I do remember it like kind of probably 10 years ago, it being a big thing about every kid having like their own computer and every school being like going digital. And I thought that would have happened by now. What would you have thought that would have happened by now? And do you think that's something we should do? Because I thought that was very much something that we should do until I kind of did my show with Adam last week, and we had Dr. Shanav Nishani on. And I was like, actually, then they're looking at a computer screen all day, and then they're going home, and then they're probably on their phones. And one of the things he said is like, it's actually better for them to watch telly on a big screen, because actually there's a massive increase in kids' eyesight problems by looking at small screens. But part of me feels like we should be more tech savvy by now, but I just actually, do we need to go backwards a bit and break it up and have less tech? But do we need to have...
I think we need more tech, but I think we need to be smart about how we use tech. So, for example, like going back to the concept of like a project thing, right? It doesn't need to be that the students are sat doing everything on the computer, but, you know, why is it that we don't have it that somebody's really interested in carpentry? Okay, so let them use a computer, research carpentry, get some information, watch some YouTube videos on how to do things, because let's be honest, as adults, that's how we do it. We if you have to fix something, heaven knows we all just go to a YouTube video, watch it, and give it a shot. So you know, do that, and then get them to, and now you do the thing. You know, like, it doesn't, just because we're using tech in schools doesn't mean that that's only what they're doing in school. I think the problem comes when we get everything on a computer and we take away the human interaction of it. I think that's the problem. I think that is a problem, and I would agree that that's where we have an issue with screens. We don't want to sit students in front of screens for 4 hours doing on-screen stuff. But what they can do is potentially, you know, okay, what if my student wants to learn about growing food? They can do a huge amount of research, but then they've got to set up a hydroponic system to make it actually work in real time. And actually, you're learning how to use the tech to actually develop things and improve. I think I'm surprised we're not there. Because if you think about education, you know, I won't give away how old my mum is, but, you know, she had a very similar experience of education as to what I have now. Not much has changed.
Whereas it has changed since my mum did O-levels. Apologies, Mum. She's been on the show a few times if you want to listen to her antics of when she was younger at school. A teacher. She taught you she was 73. She likes to remind me. I'm still going to be here kicking around the education system. Be like, in my day. Well, in that case, do you agree with the Conservatives? They said new teachers in priority areas and key STEM and technical subjects will receive bonuses of up to £30,000 tax-free. So do we need to get more teachers into STEM subjects to be able to kind of boost that ability to be able to get kids engaged in that kind of technology?
No. Controversial. But I think that why is it that every recruitment and retention solution is let's give them a bursary for the first couple of years. Let's give them some free money for the first couple of years and zero incentive for them to actually stay. You know,
I want a bonus for every 10 years that I do. I want like 10 grand every 10 years that I crack on into this job. I think that's where they're going wrong. That's where they need to pitch it.
I think it's even simpler than that. I think for every 2 years that you work in the education system, we take away 1 year's worth of student loan debt that you've got.
I mean, I'm so old, mine will get written off after 30 years, and I'm not far off. But yeah, I do.
But that would make a change to your finances each month, because you wouldn't be then paying student loan back. So you'd get a double benefit. You'd get it paid off, so it wouldn't be hanging over you, and then you would get more money per month because it wouldn't be going to student loan. So you'd see a small uplift, and that would actually make a difference, because we all pay to, most of us at least, pay to do a PGCE. They're not cheap. They're like flipping expensive now. And so you're paying to do a course to then go work in the public sector. And then if you do any courses on top of it, oftentimes to some extent you're funding it on your own. And there's little incentive to then strive, because you're staying at the same threshold. Nothing's much changing. I think this idea of making huge bonuses or bursaries to train to teach and for the first year, like, it's not paying off. It hasn't paid off in the last 5 years, 10 years of them doing it. So why do we think if we change it like to the same concept again, it's going to suddenly work? Like that is literally the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a difference. So I think we need something that actually encourages teachers to stay and improve.
I think 10 grand every 10 years. I'm still voting for it. Well, on that note, though, when you talk about kind of courses and stuff, my other one would be that every SLT member has to have done a certain training course. I don't think you should be allowed an SLT until you've done a certain number. NQTs are NPQs are okay, but I feel there's much more rigorous courses than that cover lots of different things. Like the one I'm doing, I'm realizing that a lot of people in across all the schools that I've been in SLT haven't learned the things that I'm learning. And I think, like, especially when I interviewed Peter Hughes about his book, he did the course, and it was very evident in the way he wrote about outstanding leadership, and that he had done that course and the qualities and the things that he absorbed from that. I think there's a lot to be said from kind of physical on the job training, but I also feel like that would support SLT, because I think generally a lot of people go into SLT and then struggle with the jump and the load, and actually if they need to have the skills to be able to do that, because it is a different skill set to being in the classroom.
Yeah, I think there needs to be more training at all levels, and I think there needs to be. I think we need to increase public perceptions of teachers, because in many cultures being a teacher is really highly regarded, and it's seen as you actually you're a really important part of society, and your opinion and your voice carries a lot of weight. Whereas in this country it's like, oh, you're a teacher, are you? It's almost like,
enjoy your summer.
People have been to school, therefore they know how to be a teacher. Like, we don't do that any other way. It's not like we've been to hospital and we can suddenly be a doctor and do surgery. We don't get on a train and think we can drive one. That doesn't happen. Yet people think, oh, they know how to do your job without any training or any idea. And I think we need to boost the public perception of teachers and boost how we support teachers. And also, not everybody has to go into SLT. Not everybody has to be a head of department. And I actually think, where do we encourage teachers to teach rather than strive to be we don't really strive, have positions generally for teachers to just strive to be amazing teachers.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for just pausing, and it is that mental thing, isn't it? Like I took a step backwards just to be a better mum because my kid was at the school next door, and it is that I feel like I've paused my progression, and but I feel guilty for that, because I do want to get there, but actually there is something insane in learning your craft and doing it well, but also I'm that person that, like, I don't feel we ever stop learning. Everything is always going to develop. I'm never going to have that perfect moment. And I think it was who did I have on? I think it was Brian that I had on. He talked about what was it? The idea of we're always focusing on getting to level 11, but actually we could do level 6 really well, and that would be fine. And we
Yeah,
don't
but
need
I
to
think,
constantly
you know,
focus, otherwise that's how we're going to burn out.
but if you want to strive to be a senior leader, I don't see an issue with that. But I do think that but in part of doing that, you've got to respect teaching expertise, and you've got to sort of respect the fact that there needs to be progression for teachers to be great teachers, and almost, and maybe it's that there should be roles between schools about sharing teaching. I know that some schools have lead practitioners, and some schools have like a head of department and then a head of sort of learning within that department as someone who focuses on the subject specific CPD rather than like the admin side of things. I know some bigger schools do that. I just think we need to consider the fact that, it's okay, absolutely fine if you want to be assistant head teacher and make those changes and be in that position, or head teacher. But then you also need to have an extreme amount of respect for the teacher who, they're absolutely amazing at teaching and they are amazing change makers in the classroom, but they have no requirement to want to change any policy.
Yeah, and I think it's also kind of that whole thing of not doing two things too quickly and pushing people up, because that you need people to fill those gaps. But I also like that idea of like almost like a sabbatical or a mini sabbatical. Like, it'd be nice to be going to actually spend a whole week in someone else's school and kind of go see how it is as a whole school and how that department is, and see how the lessons are and how the different year groups respond to those lessons and how all the sequence builds up. Like, I feel like there should be more collaboration and more opportunity. It's difficult, isn't it? Because then your kids get cover and then they get further behind. But I think there should be more of that opportunity to kind of, like you said, collaborate and look across that. I know it's not quite teaching, but Liberal Democrats in theirs did say create a new lifelong skill grant, giving all adults £5,000 to spend on education and training throughout their lives, and aim to increase them to 10,000 in the future when the public finances allow. Like, I quite like that.
I
And
love it.
maybe that
Absolutely
might be
love
a
it.
point why people might move to education, because they might have that opportunity to retrain and get that qualification to get into teaching.
Yeah, I love it as a concept. Not sure how it's going to actually work in practice, but I love it as a concept. We live in a society where we're told that on average now people will have completely different careers over their lifetime, but we have absolutely nothing in place to support those career changes. And I think, where is the money to go back and do like a business course? We have students who leave our course, leave our school at 16, go off and become plumbers, and they're amazing plumbers, but they have absolutely no business understanding whatsoever, yet they're trying to run their own business. So where is a grant for somebody to go back and do evening classes in business so that they can be successful in their job?
Oh, who was it? It was Reese at my school was saying about how when people go and do their apprenticeships, that every time they pass a level, they should get given a piece of equipment. So you gradually build up, and when you leave your apprenticeship, you therefore have all the tools to be able to go and do that job. Because otherwise, you get doing the apprenticeship and then you leave, and then you don't have the money to set yourself up and go and do it. And I quite like that idea.
Yeah, I think whatever way we do it, I think we need to consider learning as more of a community initiative and not just schools. And I think that would fix a lot of our problems, because I think local businesses need to think about how they can support and develop talent in the local area. And I think that would feed in well into different companies' recruitment. I think the local councils need to think about actually what are they doing to bring like businesses to schools. I don't mean literally for like an open day, but why can't we have like somebody bringing in resources and doing a welding workshop, for example? Why can't we do have those things within school rather than that our students having to wait till 16 before they can access these vocational jobs? You know, we've got some students that go off for day placements and do construction and absolutely love it, but they have to wait till 16 to do that as a course.
I think you're so right. And that's the thing. It should be a point where there's more opportunities for them to see that. And I do think I'm a big fan in the after school curriculum, and I feel like that's actually where we can create lots of jobs for kind of locals that can create like little activities. And there should be after school clubs, kind of wraparound care that's after school, so that parents don't have to leave their jobs early, can work till 5 o'clock. So there is wraparound care from schools, but it's not by school, it's by agencies that are coming in and running all these different activities. It's from different jobs, kind of giving like different, like you could have I'm watching a TV show on Netflix where the local lawyer goes in and does this law club after school, and then takes them and they do this mock trial and stuff, like something like that, where there's kind of, it builds in the community, it builds in kind of local organisations, but whether it be sport or that kind of thing. But there should be that optional after school, because actually it's going to be your free school meals and your pupil premium students that are going to access that, because their parents are going to be the ones that desperately need the free childcare. So they shouldn't be ones that you can only pay for. It should be accessible to them. And actually that's going to close the attainment gap as well, because they're going to be exposed to these different things and have those opportunities.
Yeah, but I think that's a community effort, you know. Regardless of what your job is, it doesn't need to have a fancy title, but there's lots that you can talk about. You know, I've worked in schools where we've had the catering team that caters for the school come and do a presentation on what goes into making the meal that the students pick up at lunchtime. You know, what actually goes into it, as in, not, I don't mean literally what is the ingredients, but I mean, you know, what is the business behind it? How do you plan the meals? How do you know how many meals you're going to need? Because more people might buy stuff for this Tuesday because it's sunny, but you don't know the weather forecast. So, you know, and actually what are all the health and safety that they have to know? What's the procedures behind closed doors and all those things? And, you know, a lot of the students found that fascinating, because they actually got to see behind closed doors of things that some of them had no perspective of. And I think all those little things, like, we don't, like, lawyers are amazing, but it doesn't necessarily have to be big name professions. But actually having students engaging with people in different careers is important.
And even like having that volunteer aspect, like it be that they go to the local care home and read to them. It can be any of that kind of thing that's going to just broaden their horizons.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Imagine having your own instructional coach available 24/7. Now you can with the Teaching How-Tos platform. This highly personalised social platform empowers busy teachers to learn and apply evidence-based teaching techniques, either independently, working collaboratively with their peers, or with our new AI assistant. The platform features over 160 visual guides to teaching techniques, designed to help you quickly and easily implement high-impact practices that boost student engagement and improve learning outcomes. Join over 200 institutions worldwide that are elevating their teaching practices with the How-To app. No gurus, just practical support anytime you need it. Interested in finding out more? Visit teachinghowtos.com and register for our next webinar.
Empowering education with Easy for You, where innovation meets accessibility. Our subscription-based offering not only equips schools with cutting-edge devices, but revolutionizes the learning experience by eliminating financial barriers, streamlining support, and embracing technology. We're not just providing tools, we're shaping a future where every student can thrive, unburdened by limitations. Easy for You, transforming education, one device at a time. Find out more at www.easyforyou.school.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading. Hi teachers, we're Apps for Good, and we give schools like yours free introductory computing courses. Our courses are for everyone, including those who aren't computing teachers, and they're fully equipped with resources mapped to the UK computing curriculum. Independent learning is central to our courses. Your students will develop essential and digital skills by working in teams to create prototype apps for good. We'll even connect you with industry volunteers to give real-world feedback. Let's empower every young person you teach to shape their future with technology. Speak to us at www.appsforgood.org.
Welcome to Teachers Talk Radio. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
The Conservatives, they said a mandate of 2 hours of PE every week in primary and secondary schools. What do you think to that?
I think it's hard because I'm an adult who loves sports or varying different sports, but I was a kid who hated PE at school because I think it didn't really work for me in the sense that it just, like, we wouldn't, if you said to most adults, I'll tell you what, midway through your work day, I want you to go out, get changed, go out and play football, come back in and carry on with your work day, all within an hour, most adults would say to you, well, no, because I need a shower, or, like, when am I going to, like, recover after it? But yet we do it to our young people.
Yeah, the idea of running around, especially in this weather, and then sitting in a classroom for the rest of the day does not appeal. But I do think it's really important. Actually, I think I want to say it's, going back, I want to say it's my second show I ever did at Teacher Talk Radio. I had Josh on, who works at a private school and is a strength and conditioning coach. And we talked about how, like, PE needs to change and, again, adapt and keep up to it. Like, my school has a gym and the kids love and they opt and do actually gym after school and stuff. And my niece, who's in year 11, she goes and trains at a gym because of her lung condition. It's been really important for her. And actually, they've now offered her work experience and have now offered her a free apprenticeship to train and get her coaching qualifications from it. So she, like, I think it is, a lot of the young kids are into that gym fitness and healthy, but they're not into kind of rounders and run around the field. Like, do we, like, I agree that they need to be active, but it is a case of working out the correct way of being active. So if they're going to do that, I almost feel like they need to give every school an extra PE teacher, so therefore the ratios can be lower and they can offer more activities.
Yeah, I think we need to consider, like, the point of PE, and I think we need to instill healthy attitudes and all these skills. But I think first and foremost, a passion for keeping ourselves healthy would make the biggest difference. And I quite like what universities do, where, Wednesday afternoon everybody's off regardless of age or anything, and you pick a sport to go and do. And whether that is you're going to spend 2 hours learning about being in the gym and how to be safe in the gym, or you spend 2 hours going and learning, like, all the ins and outs of how to be successful at football or at korfball, or if you want to play.
I really want you to say trapeze yoga because that was hilarious.
Well, it was certainly something when I went upside down and smacked my head on the floor. But but I think that is the case. We need to give students a bit more choice on it, I think, to develop those passions. Because part of the bit that I hated at school was, you'd be put in a you'd be told that you'd be doing for 6 weeks, like, rounders or something, which was great and all, but it got a bit repetitive, and I just wanted to have a bit of a laugh and run around. Like,
Just do tag up until you're 16.
But I first played ultimate frisbee at university, like as a laugh, and I found it really good fun. We then, last week with my form on a Friday, we got a frisbee out and went out on the field and played some ultimate frisbee. Absolutely loved it. Got a bit of exercise in, got some fresh air, had a bit of a laugh, got to see their teacher running around like a hooligan, and we move on. But I think, like, obviously there's a place for the skills that need to be learnt. I'm not disregarding any of those things, but I do think if what we want is a healthier society and people who are happier to exercise, then we need to put things into place to make that happen. And I think we need to consider giving students choices. They have to do 2 hours of something. Okay, well, 2 hours of let them pick.
And if they don't necessarily want to do the sport, maybe that's 2 hours of catering where they're learning about healthy nutrition and how to cook healthily and how to manage their health in that way.
I actually don't even think. I think most of our students, if we gave them a reasonable number of choices, we'd be able to manage it. Whether they spend 2 hours learning it, like playing ping pong or my bad, table tennis. I got corrected on that yesterday. Learning those skills. Maybe they don't like running around. Maybe they don't like how they feel when they run. So maybe they try something else. Or they try some Pilates. Whatever it is. But I think it's about getting a passion for keeping yourself healthy and being able to enjoy it and have a laugh, and not running round a field. I mean, how many of us adults can remember doing cross country, hating it, sweating, red-faced, and then somehow you're expected to come in, get changed, put on a shirt with a tie on, and then go and sit in maths. And you'd be like, well, I'm sweaty and horrible, and I now feel grim, and I've got another 4 hours of my day to get through. It's not enjoyable.
I quite like the idea of Wednesday afternoon PE, but having all the staff almost get involved as a staff well-being thing, that you get to pick your own sport as well and go and join in. Because there's something to be said when a student sees you modelling the things that they should be doing in life, because they might not necessarily have that at home.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favourite things about when I started at my current school a couple of years ago was that they a lot of the time we do sports on Friday. So, we have interform sports with like dodgeball and bench ball and capture the flag and these different things. And just a chance to blow off some steam. And some students, it's just them watching sports, being around it, having team spirit and having some community and having some grace to other teams. Some of our students just sit and make up chants to support their team, and it's having that community human element that actually builds those memories, so that when you're telling a student that they can't do something, or you're then sat with them trying to help them with a really hard concept, they know that you're on their side and you've built that relationship because they know that you're there to support them.
I completely agree. I scrap my Wednesday afternoons. I'm all for Friday afternoons. That's what Friday afternoons should be for. Because otherwise, that grotty Year 9 class, period 5 on a Friday, they're not going to remember what you said, and it's just painful sometimes.
But Wednesday afternoon, it breaks it into 2 mini weeks.
Oh, I don't know. I like the idea of that being Friday. The last thing you do on a Friday before you go home, you're going to go home feeling positive and feeling positive about being at school. I don't know. I've got a couple more for you. I've got one that's on a lot of them, but I don't think they've got it quite right. A lot of them will say about making sure admission decisions account for the need of communities and require that all schools to cooperate with their local authorities on school admissions, SEND inclusion and planning. And a lot of them have said they're going to make extra SRBs and have more SEND provision. For me, as somebody that has a child in an SRV and at a school with a very successful SRB that has a long waiting list to get in, I can really see the positives of them. And I think every school should have an SRB, rather than it being these odd schools that are kind of like, well, they're the specialists in that. So all the kids with SEND needs go to that school as opposed to the other school. And therefore the ratios aren't right. I think every school should have an SRB in some kind of form, but also none of them mention the funding behind the SEND.
Yeah,
because the SEND funding hasn't changed in 2013, and it's like it needs to be increased so these kids with SEND needs actually have the right adult kind of ratio with them to help them.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because we flip-flop. If you look at the educational history, we flip-flop between students with SEND being in school and students with SEND being in their own discrete provision. As somebody who's worked in a specialist school, I 100% think that we have need for it, and they do some amazing work, and they're such specialists. And not only that, but they can then go in and support other schools and mainstream schools with their provision. And I think that's really important, because what you end up with is, for example, a school with a specialist in autism who has a group of professionals each with subject discipline knowledge, being able to support local schools and mainstream schools on how actually will make the difference for those pupils. But I think that we are always going to need specialist provisional schools because of the need of students, and mainstream school doesn't work for a lot of students, and it can be too overwhelming, and it's a lot when you consider that for many young people with special educational needs, they're going through secondary school trying to get to grips with their special educational need at the same time as all the other hormones and everything going on. And it can be significantly too much, and there can be safeguarding risks, etc., associated with that. So I think I kind of agree and disagree with you in that I think we need a coherent funded provision where it's split between specialist schools and SRBs that both have adequate funding, that going back to your point earlier, is collaboration based. If you've got a school with a SRB specific for a particular condition, make it work for other local schools. Like, offer support.
And I think it's that as well. But also, the kids with SEND needs, they can be quite bright, but actually they're going to be potentially ones that struggle with the exam situation. So I still feel like our teacher assessment graded GCSEs would benefit them, and actually we'd see more kids with SEND needs have increased grades. And I also think, because there's always an attainment gap, isn't there, between girls and boys, and I feel like potentially doing it that way as well could also see that level out, because I feel like girls just have more in terms of themselves, in terms of having the discipline to revise, where boys don't. But I think if the polls are changed and they have to do it from the start and they know everything counts, then they're able to do that. I just think, and the other one that's come up a few times in all the policies is mental health, and having mental counsellors in primary and secondary schools, a qualified mental health professional in every school. But granted, I really, really think that is valuable, and they do need it, because as well as the SEND and the EHCPs, I think the EHCPs are at the highest rate and they're not being done in enough time. They need to invest in that and making sure that the people who are doing that outside of education are getting those done in the correct time frame. And it's a team sport, isn't it? Same with the GPs. They need to assist and get these diagnoses happening quicker, so those kids can get more support in school, so those schools get the funding to be able to support them. And I know that the mental health professionals help in terms of getting kids referred to CAMHS quicker, but there's such a long wait in getting these kids to CAMHS, which is why I think potentially this kind of also links in with our PSHE GCSE that manages them into well-being kids and manages their kind of whole life skills, basically, in terms of managing themselves, and they're regulating themselves with their hormones, but also building those skills that they go on to outside of school, and they know how to manage those skills that we know work, but I was never taught them. I had to go and learn them. But I do think, again, I don't know whether people are just putting it in their manifestos because it's things that they've heard, that kids are struggling with their mental health. The attendance issues are because of kids' mental health. But actually, is it deeper than that we're just not giving them the skills to be able to deal with it?
Yeah, I think I love the idea of counsellors within school more. I think it's a really important thing. I think actually too much is being put on teachers increasingly, but I think that's a whole net society thing, in the sense that we have less counsellors, CAMHS support's dropped, social work numbers have dropped. The threshold to get support from CAMHS in the majority of places is once it's too late, frankly, and that means that we're not addressing things often, and it's festering and getting worse and worse and worse. And I think, you know, a lot of schools are paying out of own pocket to get counsellors, and I think actually I don't really understand why we don't put in place a lot of training, get some counsellors into schools and get them to support students in a real way, rather than trying to do one-off sessions. Like, I mean, I've heard of schools trying to get counsellors to come in and do one-off sessions, but we know that doesn't necessarily work. Trying to get counsellors to do sort of 15-minute sessions, you know, that's not long enough to build a relationship.
No.
But equally, as teaching staff, I think an awful lot is put on teachers. You know, the police are, for whatever reason, increasingly sending things back to schools. You know, there's a lot of, well, they're under 16, so the school can do some crime safety with them, or some learning with them, or, you know, the school can work with them on this, and the school can work with them on that, and the school can help them with this. And the reality is the school doesn't have enough money or staff to do it, or the expertise. You know, we're teaching staff. We are specialists in building educational relationships. We're specialists on teaching our subjects. We're specialists on crafting the best outcomes we can for our students. We're not specialists on counselling, and we're not specialists on mental health. And a one-day mental health first aider course isn't going to change that.
And I think that also it shouldn't be. It's great that these kids are getting that opportunity, but I feel it should be every kid has that opportunity. I feel like every kid in the school should have at least like an hour with a counsellor once a term, so they have that person to talk to that had that opportunity, because it's only going to be the kids that are utilising that, but actually everyone could see a benefit from it. And we are now a society where it is less frowned upon. That is like more of a normal situation, and I feel like there is space to kind of make it okay to talk about how you feel. And actually maybe even teachers, maybe add teachers into that we all have an hour free once a term to go and speak to a counsellor and just kind of have that little reflow and stuff, so it doesn't become that ranty thing in the staff room, that you're having that opportunity and we're looking after ourselves and looking after each other.
Yeah, I think it's really important, and I think but interestingly, like, a lot of things are put on to teachers as form tutors. It's almost like, well, you do that pastoral, you do that pastoral bit in that 30 minutes a day. You're doing the pastoral bit, but, you know, as far as I'm aware, I've never had any training on how to be a good form tutor.
Yeah, we talked about this before, didn't we? It should be compulsory on an insert, especially at the start of the year. You should have an insert session on how to be a good tutor every year.
Yeah, it's almost like, why do we not do any training on, you know, we talk about our teaching and learning directives for the year and how we're going to improve that, but nobody ever, or like, you know, the safeguarding, keeping children safe in education updates, we do all those things, but there's never, I'll tell you what, this year in form time, we're going to really work on blank. You know?
It's like, these are the kids and these are what you need to worry about. But it's never like, this is how you're good at being a tutor. Like,
yeah, it's weird though that, like, you know, things go wrong, and as a form tutor, it's like, well, you know, you need to see the mediation between these pupils, or, you know, as their form tutor, can you have a word with them about this, or as a form, you know, there's a lot of as the form tutor, can you, or you are going to, I just wonder if we could upskill our form tutors in any way to actually create a bit of change. And I don't expect that to take away from the need for counselling and the need for any of those things, but I think it's almost like building that foundational knowledge. Like, I talk to my students about their sleep schedule, talking to their students about this, you know, like pointing out, okay, I get the gist that you want to stay up all night, but you feel rubbish right now, and you are tired, and you feel a little bit sick if you're honest, and, you know, why don't you, like, next time, let's think about prioritising sleep so that you don't have that feeling. Or, you know, actually, you know, we spent last week doing that exercise out on the field and having a bit of a laugh. How much better did you feel for that? So what can you do this week to get that same feeling? And I think if we actually focus on those little tweaks, we can make big changes. But going back to your point, I think we need to encourage talking more. I think we've lost in society a huge amount of talking. Like, we're seeing less intergenerational conversations between our young people and parents, and we're seeing less conversations being had between students, because they're all doing it ironically on social media that's not actually social. And And I think we're losing the art of talking for a lot of these people and communicating how people are feeling and what they're thinking. And I think that poses a real problem.
I completely agree. And we could go on, but we have come to the end of my show. But if you've enjoyed our chat, this is just like a little induction to what is coming up on Teacher Talk Radio this week. So on Sunday morning, instead of the weekly review, I believe there's going to be a political review where we're going through the different manifestos. And I didn't say this earlier, but Christopher, he has an idea for Ofsted that we should have a jury service Ofsted where teachers are assigned a week where they have to go and do Ofsted and they have to be allowed out of the school for that week. So it'll be interesting to see what people think of that. But that we're going to make a TTR manifesto of our own of what would be our pledges to education if we would do it. So we've certainly got the ball rolling today. So if you've enjoyed today's show, that do go and check that one out. It's going to be a real gritty one. I think it's going to be interesting to see, and you can tweet in and message in your comments as the show will be live. But also thank you to our lovely sponsors. We've got John Catt Educational with their professional development books available at johncatbookshop.com, and you can use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. We've got Teaching How-Tos, which is having your own instructional coach available 24/7 with their also AI assistant to help you plan your lessons, and you can check them out at teachinghowtos.com. And we've got Easy for You, empowering education with innovation meeting accessibility, so you can get your school all kitted out at www.easyforyou.schools. And then finally we've got Apps for Good, so giving schools free introductory computing courses and also equipping students to develop essential and digital skills by working with in teams to create a prototype apps for use. And you can see them by visiting www.appsforgood.org. So thank you everyone so much for listening, and thanks for Lydia for being my guest and helping me put the educational world to rights. I feel like we've only touched the surface. I feel like that one could go on. There's so many things that need to change, but education changes at such a rapid pace, it's hard to keep up. But thank you for everyone for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.